Good evening, or late afternoon. Bill Boyle here, substituting for Bob Brown. Call to opening of the Town of Corte Madera Climate Action Committee meeting for Wednesday, September 21st. And should I take the official roll call? Is that how you folks do it?
I believe that's what Bob would do if you were.
Everybody's new. Okay, we'll start with those not present or not in room. Martin Wall,
Yes, hello, present.
Phil Simon, Leslie Alden, Amy Roos, Meredith Foster, and Dave Johnson is not here. All right, with that, and I will turn it over to co-chair Amy.
Flag.
Sure.
What? Yes, it is.
It is. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the
United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so with that, then we are opening to the public regarding any non-agenda items.
Correct. Yep, open time for public expression.
We're opening it up to public for any comments, non-agenda items.
And
Seeing,
I have Jody Timms has raised her hand.
Great.
Seeing no one in the room. Jody, I'm allowing you to speak.
good afternoon, Climate Committee. Sorry, I don't remember your official title. I'm Jody Timms, Chair of the Fairfax Climate Action Committee, and I just wanted to be sure that your group is aware of the monthly meetings that we're holding now for all of the sustainability and climate action committees or collaborations in Marin. So if anybody who's there would like to attend that monthly meeting, we primarily are sharing what each of the groups are doing and just supporting each other as we all take initiatives to address the climate crisis we're in the midst of. So I'll be in touch, or people can reach out to me if you'd like to be part of that monthly meeting. So have a great meeting, and I'm glad to see you guys working away.
Thank you, Jody. Can I?
Yes,
You'll send, okay, so we'll send out our contact information to you.
sounds
Jody,
great.
can you just tell us the date of the next meeting?
I'm sorry, I don't have my calendar in front of me, or my phone. Sorry, I can't remember. It's like the third, Wednesday or something, but I can be sure that Martin has it and passes it around, or however you'd like to get it. I'm sorry, I don't have it handy.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you for joining and letting us know. We're eager to partner.
Sounds great. Thank you, and have a good meeting.
Thank you.
And we have no other attendees with hands raised at this point.
Okay, then we move on to approval of minutes from the
Yes.
last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? We have to motion that.
I think you need to ask if anyone has any changes or noted anything.
Any changes or anything to note?
I didn't listen to the recording of the meeting, but I thought that on the ad hoc committees on item 8, that there were some other. We only have one person listed on events and tracking climate policies, and I'm not sure that that's how the raising of hands went. So I think Phil volunteered to work on climate policies, and Amy volunteered to work on events. I think that we had more hands raised for those things. And I don't remember if Meredith had some interest. I think I offered to work on policies and events as well, but I don't remember exactly. So Does anyone else recall how that?
I think that's correct. I think you did.
I'm afraid I did.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I
just-
can
just
check.
that call out. And the one thing that, it's not in the minutes, but in my notes, I did ask, and I sent an email out as well, if we could get copies of via email or however you want to send them to us after meetings of PowerPoint presentations or
Mhm.
any other materials that come up during a meeting. It would be hugely helpful to have those records going forward.
Sure thing. Yes, I did see your email, Leslie, and we'll make a note of that.
And we are going to discuss subcommittees in this meeting. So perhaps we
Okay,
can talk
yeah.
a little bit about who's assigned and what the expectations are around the subcommittees.
Sounds like a good idea.
Good.
Other than that, I didn't see any other notes to change.
Anything else? Everything look good? Thank you for bringing that up. Do we move on or do we need to?
You can just take a voice vote, all in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting,
With noted changes.
noted
With
changes.
noted changes? All
I,
Aye.
I
Any objections? So moved.
moved. Learning as we go.
It's all good. It's all good. All right.
Okay, so moving on to committee member updates. So I think this is an open floor for any committee member to provide updates. So I will open it. I have a couple, but I will let anybody else go first.
Meredith, did you want to talk about the event or recruitment?
Sure, I mean, were you gonna?
Sure, but you go ahead.
So we tabled at the Corte Madera Lions car show. I thought it was pretty successful. We definitely, I think our outreach was similar to last year in terms of the scope. We definitely answered a lot of questions about EVs, home electrification. We passed some flyers out. I got more students signed up for the Climate Ambassador program, which was exciting. Do you have any?
Yeah, I think that we had a good presence there. I think we sharpened our look and feel of our table presence, more to do, but I think that was good. We did not get as many pledges as we did last year. I think we got about 13 pledges. So we, as a committee, have a goal of 200 pledges, and I'm getting the current count from Ride and Drive Clean to see where we're at. That being said, I think we had really good conversations. It felt like people that were at the car show and coming up to the booth were really thinking through EV adoption and also home electrification. So I think it was a definitely good participation and another great car show put on by the Lions Club. That's what I would add. Anything else, Leslie?
Well, you and I are going to be presenting to the Lions Club tomorrow evening. It's our second year, as you just mentioned, to be part of the car show. And obviously it's mostly gas cars, but we were with the electric vehicles, which was really fun. And so sort of broadening, deepening the partnership with the Lions Club. We're going to be presenting to them for the committee on behalf of the committee tomorrow evening. Where I think our focus is really going to be, hey, we're just getting started, but we've really been lucky to, be invited by you the last 2 years. And, how can we continue and deepen that partnership? So I think we're looking forward to that. And this coming Saturday, Ride and Drive Clean is doing a couple of events, or at least one, in Kentfield at College of Marin, I believe. So that's something that anyone who's interested in EVs should go on that website, Ride and Drive Clean, or Drive Clean Bay Area. I think it'll get you to the same location on the website. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
The only thing that I was going to add with regard to the presentation we're doing tomorrow night is that the idea there is to create an advocacy presentation of sorts that gives an overview of what our committee is up to, key stats relative to climate within Corte Madera, and then also actions that residents can take and how we partner. And the idea is that we create this, it's one and done, and certainly there can be refinements, but then the different committee members can use that presentation as we advocate across Corte Madera and other jurisdictions if needed. So we'll be testing it out tomorrow and see how it goes. And again, hopefully then we've got something turnkey that we can all use for future events.
And one more note on the car show. I think I was interacting mostly with people with this spinny wheel of different kind of busting myths about EVs. And I think a lot of people, this idea of being kind of myth busters around common thoughts about EVs, whether it's price or range or maintenance, I think that was a really accessible place for people to kind of start thinking about these cars that they might not have considered before. So, in future resources that we share with the community, I think definitely keeping this idea of being myth busters around EVs in particular will be useful.
Great. Agreed. Any other committee member updates?
Kind of combined 4 and 5 there, didn't we?
We did, but that's okay. But let's go ahead and move on to the ad hoc subcommittee reports. So this brings us to the quick discussion we had earlier about the ad hoc subcommittee. So I would propose that we just look at who's on those subcommittees and then talk a little bit about what we want to accomplish with the subcommittees. My sense is that if we have these ad hoc subcommittees, we could have some formula for how they operate and report out so that we're all consistent with what the expectations are there. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's a good idea.
Yes.
Okay, so let's quickly revisit who we have on the subcommittees and make sure we're all comfortable with that. So communications, Martin, Leslie, Meredith. And can we just clarify what we mean by communication so everybody's on the same page there?
Great question.
I recall the website being part of that. I was
Yes.
definitely interested in helping
Okay.
with the website.
Website is definitely part of it. Martin, you've been contributing copy for the Corte Madera Chronicles. Is that right?
That is correct. And I haven't done it the last 2 weeks, and that's what I focus on. And one thing I wanted to touch on this evening is where everyone thinks we ought to be going in terms of priority messaging over the next couple of weeks, so that I can start preparing stuff and sending it around to the other subcommittee members. Bearing in mind that we've got the building electrification decision coming up, I think that's a high priority, but that's one thing I wanted to review. And I'm happy to take the lead on that.
Great.
Yeah, I think also with communication under that umbrella would be things like the PowerPoint presentation, flyers that we put together and distribute in the community, the website, of course. If I already said that.
So all the content, so the content and the channels.
Yeah, with the assistance and support of town staff, I would think.
Okay.
Also.
All right. All right, so I'm just going to include sort of the content and channels as sort of an umbrella. And then everything that you guys have noted.
Right. What we talked about last meeting was that Mike Moriarty would be.
No, I said if you have time, but I can wait. Yeah. Oh, right. Because of not to worry. Don't worry.
We should ask
Okay.
Jody to mute.
Yeah, I'd like to do it this weekend if I can get it in there this weekend. Okay.
There we go.
Very good. So one of the things that we did note at the last meeting was that the priorities was EV adoption and conserving energy, electrification of our buildings. I think that's been the focus. And just to clarify that, electrification of transportation and electrification of the built environment. Those are the two big buckets with lots of little things in each bucket.
Yep. Everybody feel good about that? So Martin, I think that gets to your question about the content for upcoming newsletters.
It does. And I had just jotted down some things and I wanted to put them out there, you know, and we could chat about them. One thing I thought of is over the next couple of issues to hit the details of the proposed building code ordinances for new construction, existing buildings, and then EV charging, which are the three components of that. Something else that we could look at is the summary of subsidies and incentives for electrification, addressing the new Inflation Reduction Act, along with the other subsidies that are available from locals like PG&E, MCE, by Bayren and Marin County. That's ideas of, you know, what to get at, so we can have succinct pieces. And I'm thinking, of course, in terms of the chronicles to put those in. So that's, how does
I
that
like
look?
all of that, Martin. I guess I would say that, and I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, like maybe there's a way to go back and forth between building electrification and transportation, maybe weekly or however, whatever the frequency is, and just sort of flip. But I love the idea, the three things that you just noted about the building electrification in terms of some of the decisions that are coming up and the rebates. And I think breaking down the Inflation Reduction Act would be significant.
Yeah, that, and it won't be easy.
Yeah, I don't.
There's an awful lot of work that's already been done to pull that very, very long document apart and
Yes.
and clarify it. So I'm happy to share some of those resources with you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Good, good. In terms of prioritizing and scheduling, because we have the decision coming up about building electrification, I was saying that would have priority, and EV charging stations are in that. So, and to me, you know, access to charging stations is one of the most critical parts about increasing electric vehicle adoption. Anyway, so let me do this then. I'll put together a schedule of what I want to cover, what I think we'll cover over the next couple of weeks, and send it around to my committee members, those committee members, Meredith and Leslie and everyone else, but those are the ones who would be driving it. And Meredith, if there's things we have, you know, to talk about, you know, the youth ambassadors, it'd be great to get that out as well. I think that's probably the most effective communication thing we can do, actually.
Sure,
Okay.
sounds good. Definitely include that in the communications in the Chronicle.
Okay, well, I'll put that together and have something out by the end of next week.
Great. Thanks for that, Martin. Okay, so community, can we move on to community engagement?
Mhm.
So what, can we define what this is?
So we lost,
Oh yeah, we lost Hildy.
right, Hildy, I believe, resigned. Okay, so she was the one who was on community engagement.
I had thought there was one more. I
I'm
thought
sure
there was
that's
3
true.
people. I don't remember who it was, but
Well, what do you see? I see
On
Phil.
Oh, I see H. Simon Foster under community engagement. That's Hilda. So, and just speaking to that, what would be the process for, since we lost a member of the committee, what would be the process to add or, replace that individual, that seat on the committee? Do we open it back up to the council to appoint, or?
That's an excellent question. We're so lucky to have
you,
Rebecca Vaughn here this
Yeah,
afternoon.
that's probably up to the committee's prerogative at this point. It would be opened up in the spring with the annual recruitment process. Regardless, we always accept applications on a rolling basis, just from people that may like to submit them to have them in place in advance of the annual recruitment window open. But the formation resolution of this body said it could be no fewer than 5 and no more than 7.
Okay.
So as an advisory committee, it's not necessarily important to have an odd number. But we did not receive any additional applications for the committee from someone who may just wish to be appointed. So it's
We
up
had-
to you. We can
yeah.
you can get situated in the next couple months, and then you can welcome a new member potentially.
We had
July
a member of the public at our last meeting who was very interested. I don't know if he wants to be on the committee or if he just was very engaged on this work.
If you have a name, you can email me and I can reach out.
Okay, that would, yeah, I'll do that.
And then how does that work if we were to come across people that were interested? Would they have to apply?
Yes, they would need to apply and probably just have a meeting with the council subcommittee possibly, or if they're already known to have a subject matter interest, depending on their application and what they say in their application, we might just be able to recommend appointment. But typically it's good to have them meet with the council before appointing someone.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for bringing that up, Leslie. So, community engagement, we need some other committee members on there to help Meredith. What did we think the difference is between community engagement and events?
Well, events are a one-time in a place like the Lions Club
Okay,
car show, or Oktoberfest, or, and, you know, the farmer's market.
Right.
I think community outreach could also encompass meeting with homeowners associations, with business groups, but not as an event like a car show.
got it.
But outreach could be, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's that engagement with different parts of the community that might not be, I can't believe it, but might not be watching us right now, who don't know that we're doing this.
Got it. Okay. And Meredith, is that in line with how you were thinking about it?
Plus the students.
The students.
And students, of
schools.
course, yeah,
Okay,
Part of that.
yeah.
Yes, the schools, put
okay.
that in there, yes.
Yeah, okay.
So why don't I'm happy to sit on that subcommittee with you, given that we've got events, and events to me feel like scheduling them
Yeah,
and then,
that's a crossover.
yeah, it's a crossover.
definitely.
So I'm happy to sit on that. And if we are able to get another member of our committee, maybe that would be a great one. Okay, so events, I'll just define that. Well, you already defined it, and I think that's right on. So I think as part of how I'm thinking about that is just making sure that we have a list of events and a timeline of events. But there's also a volunteer component of that. So I think that sits across the committee, right? And I don't think we can all volunteer at one event, right? Given,
Right, again, it's not a decision making sort of thing. I mean, you'll have all 5 council members at a ribbon cutting, right?
it is, okay.
Yeah,
So what I will do for this is put together a list of events that are coming up, probably quarterly, I would say, unless it's something big like the 4th of July for next year. And then ask committee members to show up and essentially man the event so that we can rotate and it's not the same people doing it every time.
we're just getting good at it.
Yeah, I love doing it, but. Okay. And then the policies and programs.
Yep. Bill, David, Leslie.
Bill, David, Leslie. Okay.
Right?
And do we want to talk a little bit about what this subcommittee will be focused on?
Tracking climate policies?
Okay,
Well, I mean, I think that with that focus, not, we've talked about this a lot, that over time, that we don't want to go broad. We really want to stay focused on transportation and buildings and energy. So we would be tracking not only what the town of Corte Madera is anticipating, and we'll hear a report, we'll hear a presentation later on this evening, but we'll also be paying attention to, as Jody Timms invited us, to what other communities are doing and what the county is doing with that focus.
okay,
Does that make sense? Does that sound right, Phil?
Yes, that's what we talked about.
Okay.
okay.
Would that also entail putting together the recommendations that the committee has to the town council? Someone needs to sort of drive that bus,
It's a great question.
because we don't want to be designing a camel when we want to design a horse. So someone's got to like take not someone, but it seems to me a subcommittee thing where, you could have a rather intense discussion about how you'd want to put something to propose to the council. And then we'd all look at it, of course.
Right.
agree on it.
What might make sense is to have the ad hoc subcommittee on policy to review what is presented by staff and to look at what else is out there. Have a draft that we bring to, and correct me guys if I'm off track here, bring a draft to the public meeting of the full committee for discussion,
Mhm.
and then to either vote up or down on that with whatever changes other members or staff suggest. Is that kind of the protocol that we would follow?
Yeah, my only question is, I'm not real clear. You folks are an advisory body, or how do you? I'm not sure exactly how you officially communicate with the council. Is that going to be through Bob Brown, who communicates to Adam Wolf, who communicates to the council, or if you folks go directly there, how that exactly works? And then I also understand there's a climate action position in the works, and so how that person interacts with you and then with the town council is another thing to be worked out. And if you want to add,
I have the same question.
so, but certainly you can start, get those wheels turning, and hopefully
Right.
by the time you've come up with your recommendations, that your questions would be answered, or my questions would be answered, of how that gets fed up to the council.
So I guess the timing is kind of the essence, given that we're at the middle end of September and going into the fourth quarter of this year. We'll have maybe a couple of new council members in the beginning of December.
Right.
We've got to move forward with either just ratifying the California state building codes, or discussing and making a recommendation on reach codes. So I'm concerned about that timeline getting very, very tight and not having enough dialogue either with this group or with the public, and certainly with staff. So I'm interested in hearing, I think Brian Reyes is giving us a presentation on that. And then
Right.
definitely want to hear from you guys as we discuss that later. But
Yeah, I think certainly Brian can speak about the reach code, and perhaps Chris, now, or can talk about the adoption of the building code itself and what role this
Right.
committee would play in that.
so we can wait. I mean, I'm thinking we could wait and have that bigger. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because there are they're somewhat two separate things. They are somewhat connected.
Just to clarify, this is Chris. To clarify, as far as your timeline, we can adopt the new codes, which we
Right.
are required
Required
to.
to do, right.
But the reach codes can be added to at a later time if needed.
Great.
Don't
point.
have to stay on that timeline.
Great.
Basically an
point.
addendum to the adoption of the code.
Okay.
That's true. I understand that too, and I'm glad for that clarification. However, from the standpoint of being to the extent we can with it to be in unity with the other jurisdictions, timing could be an issue, because if all jurisdictions are doing whatever they want at different times, it will defeat or impair the goal of being able to present a unified, or to the extent we can, unified code to the building community, really. That's the only concern there.
So can I suggest that we continue to talk about this when you two come up on the agenda? This
Yeah,
specifically?
But thank you for
Brian and
clarifying, that,
Chris.
Chris. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. And then that way, I think we have a sense of what this subcommittee will be focused on. And if I'm hearing Phil and Rebecca correctly, it's at this point sort of ad hoc in terms of how the subcommittee brings information back to the committee until we figure out how the sustainability manager will engage with the group and council. Is that fair?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So just to wrap up on the subcommittee, I would like to just talk about sort of a process so that when we report out, we're all sort of saying the same thing in terms of the type of content. So I just wrote a couple things down, but I would like to open this up to what everybody else on the committee thinks, but like having a goal of the committee, the subcommittee, coming to the meeting with what you're working on, and if there are any questions for the committee, any outcomes and learnings, sort of 4 buckets. And I will pause and see if anybody has any reaction to that. I mean, we don't have to follow it to a T, but just to keep it somewhat structured.
And to that point, I think it would be really helpful for us to draft our own working structure, put it in binder with the climate action plan and PowerPoint presentations and whatever else we're considering, so that we have the important documents, including our process, in one place that all of us can refer back to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the binder, I'll come back to the binder, but if I'm hearing you correctly, Leslie, it's like a 1-pager with the goal, what you're working on.
Sure.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, and learnings. So if the subcommittees, and it doesn't have to be lengthy, it's just, so we know what the focus is and can share with the rest of the group. If we could have that done by the next meeting, is everybody in favor of that?
Sure. Do you want to
Yes.
list those again?
I put the goal, what you're working on, which I think changes, like as an example for the policies and programs, that's probably ever evolving, but what you're working on. If you are nearing the end, what the outcome is, or some of the things you've accomplished. So if I'm thinking events, we just did the Lions Club and we're gonna go to the Zins music on Sunday, or music.
Yes.
Thank you. You know what I mean. And then any learnings for the group.
I like
I'm
that.
sorry, any what?
Learnings.
Lessons learned.
Like
That's
as an
a-
example, Meredith brought up the Mythbusters
Mhm.
were really worked well at the car show. That would be great for the rest of us. And Martin, I know myth busting has been great for the newsletters too. So any
Yes.
learnings that we could share across the group that we can then import into some of the other subcommittees would be great.
Excellent suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. And Rebecca, and committee, please let me know how you feel about this. Can we submit it to you earlier so that people can review it before the meeting? You know what I mean? So it goes out with the packet.
I'm not the one who.
Oh.
Be normally Bob, correct?
Sort of
Bob,
like
so Bob-
committee reports, essentially, just attached to the
Sure.
agenda.
Another,
Yeah.
just a suggestion new to this, I heard you talking to Martin about the website. Instead of a binder, could this information go on your website?
I think it should be there also,
Well-
but it's helpful to, instead of me carrying around 1.5 inches of paper,
Mhm.
just to have a binder, just to keep
Sure.
everything squared away that is the same for all of us, so that we are all referring back in real time and not having to look stuff up on our phone in the middle of a meeting.
So why don't I send a note to Bob about the binder and just see what can be done there? Because I think what you're asking for is just a resource of the work that we're doing
Yes.
as a committee
Right.
with the presentations and everything else. I think we should opt to do as much digitally as we can, given we're climate, but
Like,
So we're thinking like Google Docs or something like that. Is that how this is? I mean, that,
if it's on the website, I mean, I don't know, Rebecca, we turn to you again, around protocol for a committee. We can the entire committee use Google Docs together, or is it only something that subcommittees could be working on a document? For instance, she and I have been working on the PowerPoint presentation in Google Docs, but it hasn't been the whole committee. So that allows us to, do the work. But I want to make sure that we're not
Between
committee members.
committee members.
Okay,
so that's why we have to have printed, because you can't have a folder of documents that. Got it. Okay. All right. I'll send a note to Bob on that. I'll take that as an action item.
but the subcommittees could, right? With their
Yes.
3 members? Okay.
yes. Right. So subcommittees can be working together in Google Doc or at the coffee shop, or via Zoom, but the whole committee cannot. So we will keep our documents separate. And would that be something that the town sets up? Or is it fine for us just to set up our own Google Doc?
Not set up
Okay.
Google Docs for.
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to, we're not spending anyone's money, and we're not a decision-making body, we're advisory. So, but I still, having had the Brown,
Yeah, I hate to make decisions present,
Mhm.
at the charter territory, maybe not something we've done.
So why don't I just take that action and
Okay.
we'll move
Thank
on
you.
from this one, and I'll send a note to Bob.
God, I just-
yeah, no.
Did any-
Got
it.
And not knowing how.
Okay. Anything else on the ad hoc subcommittees before we move on?
I'm good.
Good. Okay.
I
So-
I have a question. How are we going to determine when we meet as a ad hoc subcommittee?
Just, I think we're allowed to talk to each other.
No, I know,
Yeah.
but how are we going to make that decision?
Email or phones, or I don't think
Zoom.
we have to make that decision here
We
in
don't.
public. Yeah, we can, we don't have our calendars in front of us. So I think that's an email that allows us to, figure out what days work best out of the month to get
So
together.
should somebody take the lead on that?
I would think that
each
each,
group?
yeah, I think so. So
You guys over email. will have
Instigating,
to-
and as far as instigating a
You
meeting.
should nominate David since he's not here.
yeah, I like doing that.
As
I
the
like doing
chair,
that.
as the chair of the ad hoc committee.
Right.
It's a good question, but and every subcommittee can figure out.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we'll just have to, continue to find our way in the dark.
Okay. Fair enough.
Good question.
Okay, so I really want to make sure that we have time for our last agenda item, so I want to kind of breeze through the next ones. Discussion of volunteer recruitment. Does anybody have any really good ideas for this one? This would be like volunteers we're going to solicit any volunteers at the Lions Club. It's certainly future events. Do other people have ideas for how we solicit volunteers?
I mean, other than through the Chronicles and through Nextdoor, I mean, the town has like their Facebook and things. Other than those social media channels, I don't know.
I think it might be helpful if we had a particular ask, like this group is working on, this subcommittee is working on X, and would like to have interested volunteers come forward to join the subcommittee's ad hoc that's working on X. So it could be, we're going to be at the last music program at Menke Park, or it's 4th of July. But I think in all of the meetings that we go to, when we're, invited to present, that we should be asking, maybe I have a sign up sheet, meeting with HOAs, meeting with school districts, classrooms, talk to your neighbors, use all the tools that we have. But I think, we're building this. I don't think this is going to happen overnight. So I think recruitment is incredibly important, but I think we also need to know what it is we're going to be asking people to do. So, maybe we can kind of get our ducks in a row. As we go forward, we can be much more specific about what we're hoping to bring people in to work on.
Okay. One thing I would just say on volunteers is I have talked to a couple people that are interested in volunteering. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is finding out how people want to volunteer. So as people come up to us at events and want to get involved, what is their strength or talent that they want to bring to the committee? And then we can make sure that, because there's only 7 of us, so I'm sure we could use help in many different areas. Speaking of, I spoke to somebody who's very interested in helping us do some type of campaign. So I would like to put that person in touch with the communications subcommittee. So
That's great. So it sounds like what we need sort of a sign-up sheet, just asking those questions with their contact information.
yeah. And in the meantime, I'm happy to field any volunteer calls if people want to get involved as like a central resource for now, just so we can keep the names together if they come flooding in. But so let's just take that as an action, as a sign up. And Meredith, you have a lot of volunteers as students, right?
Yes, those with the students, it's tricky scheduling with them because sometimes I'm contacting with their parents and often on weekends we have like sports games and things.
Yeah.
It's been a major conflict. But if I can get enough, like prior notice, usually.
Okay. And do you think the student ambassadors would like to be a part of some of the events?
Yes, I think so, especially if we're there. Yes, I think in at events, especially if I'm there and we're there, and it's because sometimes we get questions that they're young and they wouldn't necessarily know how to field those, but
Okay.
definitely I think.
Okay. All right, anything else on volunteers?
I think she just brought up a really good point. I think we need a binder for tabling that has the answers to the frequently asked questions. And our climate action plan and who are we and what's our mission? Just so that when people who are not part of the core group are coming in, they're not deer in the headlights. Because that's really an uncomfortable place to put people.
Yep. Okay. I think that falls under communication and community engagement. So
Sounds like a community engagement thing to me.
So Meredith, I can share with you a talking points doc that we're working on. Okay. All right. Am I able to make a suggestion on the agenda?
Suggestion on the agenda, yes.
Can I flip 7 and 8?
It's completely fine with me.
How's
It's fine
everybody
with
feel?
Yeah, that's
everybody
fine.
else.
Yes, we don't keep Brian waiting any longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then to the presentation and discussion of draft countrywide electrification building code.
And there's Brian.
Hi, Brian.
You want,
Brian?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Were you gonna do an introduction or should I just dive right into it?
Am I doing that?
I think you could dive right into it.
Okay,
Well, no, actually,
No.
for the public, you should say who you are
okay.
and
At
why.
least
you-
that.
why are you in your kitchen? Right.
Who is that? Who is he in the kitchen? Exactly. My name is Brian Reyes. I'm the sustainability planner with the County of Marin. And I've been tasked with this past year and a half, I want to say, with developing a model reach code that not only unincorporated Marin County, but also other jurisdictions can use to consider passing as part of their amendments to their building codes. Let me get my slide deck up just to guide us. And please let me know if you see everything. You see my slide deck rather?
We
Okay,
can.
Perfect. There we go.
zooming through. Okay. Okay. Okay, so yeah, again, this is sort of an update to our model reach codes that we developed over this past year, and we're nearing an endpoint. Again, my name is Brian Reyes, Sustainability Planner with the county. And I always like to start with this is just sort of baselining ourselves and what we thought about going into this aspect is pretty sure we can all agree that the top of phone to act on climate change is great. And that the county, towns, cities, and our community and constituents have shared a common interest in either mitigating or adapting to climate change. And so you see this really come out through all our climate action plans, right? So this is everything that we've seen throughout all our communities, and we've all made bold, ambitious targets and put forth measures to take action. And one of the overriding sort of metrics, and you all are familiar with that, is that we have these carbon reduction goals is the mitigation side, reducing CO2 emissions. And so in 2030, if you look across all climate action plans, not only in the county, but across the state, we have about a 40 to 60% reduction, depending who you talk to, as that's an interim goal. And by 2045, at least here across the county as well as the state, is we have a carbon neutral goal. So yeah, it's pretty ambitious. And I think some of us have carbon neutral by 2030. That's super ambitious. So one thing that I like to talk about as we dive into buildings, because this is what it's about, is the trajectory of zero carbon influences as we approach our 2045 target. I have this slide that I got from a colleague from San Francisco Department of Environment, Barry Hooper. And on the y-axis, you see sort of the emissions from on-site fuel emissions. And this is basically your electricity and natural gas use on-site. And so on the y-axis, you have the time. And so in the red line, you kind of have this current path of typical business as usual. You know, we have ambitious goals, but sort of this is where our business as usual kind of gets us if we project it out going forward. In the gray line, you have sort of the ideal state of steady progress, which that never really happens. It really, reductions really happen quite dramatically in certain phases. And the yellow dotted line kind of says like, okay, if we don't act soon, the difficulty of intervention, not only commitment from the community or the local government, but also cost gets much more difficult. And we know that. So what we always advocate for are partnerships and collaborations to get this in proactive empowerment going on, which kind of bends the curve a little more. And then we're all going to go down to zero. We know one way or other we have to get there. It's just how we get there really depends on what we put forth as policy. So we dive into the Marin here, and I think a lot of you have seen this. We have such a diversity and variety of green building codes, and Martin was alluding it to earlier, is this consistency across jurisdiction building codes, not just green building codes, or differ across here in Marin. But this is more of a California issue. We all like to pass our own building codes locally. So as it pertains to green building in the blue here, and this is the last code cycle for the county, is unincorporated Marin, Mill Valley, and San Anselmo had some of the more aggressive energy efficiency requirements. And you refer to that as electric preferred, where we incentivize electrification. And the green there, we have Novato, San Rafael, Tiburon, and Fairfax have their own sort of codes where the additional efficiency requirements, they did a tier 1, it's just measuring above and beyond state standards, saying this is what we're going to meet and require from project applicants. Within that, there's even a subset of those that decided, well, we're going to exclude tier 1 energy efficiency requirements. Hopefully you are still with me. Lastly, we have the gray there, the last 5, where everyone had defaulted to building standards. So we can see the diversity of green building codes, and not just green building codes, like I said, but also it really frustrates a lot of people, whether you're a project applicant or the development community, that everything is so different. and one person may say, well, why not just default to all state standards? I don't think that's the ambition and doesn't meet the expectations of the community and those climate action and goals and measures we put forth in our climate action plan. So there's a balance to be had from just doing state minimum standards and going way far and beyond. Okay, so that's one part of the why of acting on doing building codes and addressing building emissions. The other part is we did a specific analysis of those aggressive, and they're in the blue, the electric preferred options, and what we wanted to know how that impacted those three communities. So we looked at that and analyzed permit data, and we found that this electric preferred, or this incentivizing to go all electric, did not significantly drive all electric adoption in any of our new construction projects. Here's sort of the rundown. In the left column, you have the different pathways we have, which basically is going all electric. You do some type of limited mixed fuel, which is saying no gas cooking in fireplaces are allowed, and then a standard mixed fuel. Majority of projects, 67%, did what you would normally do. And one architect that we had interviewed as we analyzed the data, we interviewed about 22 architects and developers, and they said, you know, the client at the end of the day, 9 out of 10 just wants gas. Yeah, that's part of the big why of, okay, incentivizing was one part of it. Now we feel like maybe we should compel this time around. So backing up just a little bit, Title 24 is our state's building codes. In that are green building codes, and related in those are a lot of sections, two parts that we focus on for our purposes, Part 6 and Part 11. Part 6 is energy related codes, Part 11 is non-energy related codes. Now, the down arrow there leading to the county, city, and town green building codes. Again, like I said, we can adopt our own building codes and sort of tier off of Title 24. So anytime we amend it, as Chris had mentioned, we have to we can make it a separate item or make it a similar item, but anytime we amend it, we have to let the state know. Going further into the state green building standards, to the left there, you have Part 6, the energy efficiency codes in blue. And then to the right, you have your non-energy related Part 11, aka some of you heard Cal Green. There's multiple sections in there: environmental quality, water efficiency and conservation, metro conservation and resource efficiency are all part of it. Not something we'll focus right now. The other part that is of focus, particularly for these REACH codes, green building REACH codes, is for planning and design section, which all those EV codes are housed in. So just to give you all a simplified version of the complex codes that we have. So there's more on this 22, the current code cycle is in 2022 in Cal Green. The tiers 1 and 2, just want to let you all, those are standardized pathways for adopting REACH codes that go above and beyond state standards. And the state did this because if you're going to go above and beyond, at least do it according to a standard so that we can be as consistent as possible across different jurisdictions. In practice, that never happens. Local jurisdictions can deviate from these tiers if they want. For energy codes, Part 6, this year they did away with tiers. And if you're going to deviate from the energy codes, anytime you amend it, you have to do extra analysis and cost-effective studies according to the law. EV codes, if you're comparing it, particularly across from 2019, saw the most changes in Cal Green. There's the most modifications went there. So there was a heavy focus in EV infrastructure codes. And throughout the Title 24 or Cal Green codes, electrification measures are integrated throughout the building code. So that's a baseline of where we at and give you context, but this is what would happen since January in the engagement. So we set out to develop a model or a prototype REACH code, and in that development, we wanted to develop in partnership with the city and towns and county building officials and planners to develop what a REACH code may look like, particularly for new construction and renovations, and do it by fall of 2022, which we're upon right now. The second goal was the ideal goal, though very hard, is to adopt some sense of uniformity of building codes countywide that are consistent across all jurisdictions. Ambitious goal, something worthwhile to aim, but don't expect us all to get there. In our code development timeline, like I said, we started in January to the left there, where we began stakeholder outreach. Today, we're in, and through February through August, we engage with not only city and town staff, but also had public stakeholder meetings, which some of you participated in. And then today, we're drafting and trying to right-size the codes. The model REACH code has been launched, but all of us jurisdictions are considering it. And usually, ideally around September, October, November, we're doing the first or second reading, and you're going to adopt November or December. The code will ideally go in effect by January 1st, 2023. Okay, just a rundown of the stakeholder engagement. So first, we had 5 monthly technical working group meetings with city and town building officials and planners. Like I mentioned, we had 1 public community workshop we held in June. We had 3 focus group workshops with community members, which included the environmental, affordable housing, senior aging in place, equity priority, advocates, the building community, including developers, architects, realtors, contractors, and Rent Builders Association. Anyone who lives in the building and has interest, we really wanted to engage. So we had 3 focus groups that we held to gather feedback and information. Fourth, we had ad hoc presentations and conversations with communities, commissions like yourself, and as well as with electeds. So here's where we started with the REACH code proposal. We started with required all electric for new construction. Second is to look at requiring additional energy efficiency or electrification requirements for renovations or existing buildings for single family and multifamily developments. Third is require EV REACH codes for most building types. So what did we land on? So before I start diving into what we landed on, I kind of wanted to discuss the legacy of Marin's building decarbonization. It's kind of been 22 years in the making. So from 2001 and 2018, new construction, we've had energy efficiency requirements in one form and another, ahead of the state, way ahead of the state, and so many other jurisdictions. So that was great. And for renovations and for those appliance changeouts or time of burnout, there was no additional requirements or incentives between those years. Recently, it's accelerated, right? Like I said, in the last code cycle, we had this electric preferred option for new construction. For renovations, incentives have been flowing from the federal, state on down to the local level via Electrify Marin. So that's renovations for whole buildings. And also we had for incentives for appliance changeouts. All right, so here's what we're proposing, what we kind of landed on, model REACH code for the last codes for this code cycle. So this will go into effect 2023 all the way through 2025. For new construction, all electric, just required for all building types. For renovations, we were recommending energy efficiency and electric measures for single family residences only. Given that's about 70 to 80%, sometimes 90% of the building stock in our communities, it was best just to focus on that rather than doing something for multifamily. For appliance changeouts, the incentives we're going to continue, but so we are thinking in 2024, starting this year, we have to begin development of appliance changeout requirements and study that and look at that as a phase implementation. So what is the next phase going to bring? I think you can maybe draw your own conclusions of where this is all heading, and particularly given on all our ambitious goals. Okay, so last handful of slides here. I just want to summarize the proposed model reach codes. And so all of this is available on the county's website, which we hosted. And all this material will be available for download if you haven't already. So for new construction, like I said, all electric. In that new construction, no additional energy efficiency requirements beyond the state standards. And then the third bullet point there, that all buildings newly constructed that is not previously occupied will be covered and required with a variety of exemptions and or exceptions. So a lot of this is modeled off of Fairfax and San Osamo, who already passed it, as well as 50, 60 other jurisdictions across California have done. And so there's a lot of strong precedents here in which we drew upon. And in addition to getting a lot of stakeholder feedback. Okay, so those are the highlights. And then the highlights for the renovations, and it's single family reach codes, is that for single family projects greater than 750 square feet are covered with some exceptions. Excuse me, let me take some water. Second is energy efficiency or electrification measures, that is heat pumps and induction requirements, will be in using a flexible compliance pathway. And that pathway has been developed by the state, and it basically gives you a compliance table that you as an applicant, a compliance table, which you could choose from a list of energy efficiency or electrification measures. It boils down everything down to meeting an energy savings score. So again, since the state developed this, they developed this tool to say, like, you can't put in a measure if it's not proven cost effective. So anything in that table is cost effective according to the measures, according to the state's metrics. Lastly, I think important to highlight is that electric readiness, as well as lighting requirements, are required for all projects despite size. And that's important, that as you saw in the previous sort of legacy of phasing, I think it's important to get homes, particularly in renovations or and remodels, to become electric ready. And electric readiness installations, according to the state, is cost effective. Lastly, the fun one is EV infrastructure reach codes. And so what we have proposed initially for single family is consistent with what was last year proposed with a lot of the jurisdictions. Tier 1 and tier 2 are the same. Basically, it is saying you're EV ready with a receptacle in your ready to charge, right?
And sorry to interrupt you for a second. There's just something that popped up on the screen. Is that us or?
Oh,
It might be Brian's.
It says Microsoft OneDrive.
oh, that's weird.
It's pretty small, but
Oh,
I think we might just be able to close that box. That window.
there
this
you go.
one
Great.
is gone.
On,
Not yet.
sorry. I just made it-
It's okay. I can't see what's going.
There we go.
Are you all right? Okay, we good? Can I continue?
Yeah.
Okay,
It
great.
says, great, thank you.
Sorry. I'm just looking at my slide deck. I'm not looking at faces right now. Sorry. Okay, so the multifamily, we initially proposed tier 1 reach codes, which gives you a variety of EV capable, ready, and actually charging station installed for multifamily. But after further feedback and research and thinking about, okay, how do we get accessibility for the most people, we'll deviate from that recommendation. And we got to update all the building officials, including Chris in the room still, because I'm still trying to right size that. And so the goal there is to get 100% access charging capabilities. And there's a way to make that cost efficient without requiring like the expensive network charging stations. So more on that, still right sizing that. For existing multifamily non-residential, we recommend, and this is kind of what San Anselmo, Mill Valley, and us have been doing for a while, is if a panel is upgraded or a parking lot is modified, we recommend EV ready requirements that reaches beyond state tier standards. State standards are lackluster when it comes to that. So It's been effective in helping get a lot of charging stations in publicly over the last code cycle. The remainder of part 11, Calgary, the non-energy part is we recommended tier 1 requirements. So to wrap up, the REACH code adoption package we have, if you haven't seen it already, is on the our website since September 1st. We published it. A lot of building officials and staff and commissions got, I think you all got copies of it in advance as a courtesy. So check that out if you haven't, this URL. And then we have a survey that we're going to close pretty soon. It's been open since September 1st to get feedback on everything that was proposed. So please take that survey and circulate it amongst your community members and your listservs. Okay, that's my presentation, and I'll take questions. Thank you.
Going back to what Chris mentioned earlier, yes, I think we understand that all we need to do by state law is to submit our 2023 and to 25 building ordinances aligned with the state standards. If all of the jurisdictions or most of the jurisdictions in the county move to approve the county's suggested REACH codes, does the county then submit essentially for all of us? Or if there are the outliers and have to submit separately as an amendment at some future date, does that process and cost change for that jurisdiction?
Let me answer the first question, Leslie, and then maybe I might ask you to repeat the second one. But for the first one, no, you all have to send and sign over to the state. But part of my work is supporting other jurisdictions. So I pretty much have the templates of letters and all the documentation that needs to be run up. Basically, I can package that for everyone who wants to pass a REACH code and submit it for you. And so I'm working with the state colleagues right now to get, for example, you have to send in, if you are amending any part of the energy code, you need to send it to the California Energy Commission cost effectiveness study. So I'm getting that from the state because they conducted their own. Sorry, and Leslie, can you repeat the second part?
If a jurisdiction does not move forward approving what's suggested in this draft REACH code package and chooses to make whatever jurisdictional unique approaches in the future, whatever they decide to work on, do they then go through another amendment process? Does that take longer? Does that cost more? What are the impacts of waiting and going it alone, I guess is the question.
So it depends where you go it alone. Let's just say, for example, you adopt just the state minimum standards, and then so you're doing Title 24 state standards that's been adopted, and then say mid code cycle, let's say in 2024, you want to delay to adopt a REACH code, and so amend it. The risk of that is you'll have a gap in codes, and so let's say this year you have one type of code, your current code, and then you default to Title 24. And so for 6 months, you have Title 24, and then you go, and then you want to amend it. And so you do that mid-year in 2024, you'll have a different type of code. So there's 3 different application types and 3 different checklists that was unnecessary. If you say, for example, just pass what you initially wanted to do. So I guess staff time is the big, Chris's time, we'll say, and maybe Phil's time to do this will take a little more. If you amend, I think that answers your question in terms about going out alone. Is that?
Yeah, thank you for, I don't think I phrased the question very well, but you answered it, what I was trying to get at. So thank you.
Okay.
If the county and I think it was San Anselmo and Mill Valley are in line. And then there are a couple of cities that are ahead of the county and Mill Valley. And okay, so if they've moved forward and gotten their more ambitious approach approved by the state, they've gone through the process of proving cost effectiveness. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's only if you're amending the energy code part of Title 24. Remember that sort of chart that I gave? In the case of all electric codes, Fairfax, Sound, Sumo, a lot of us opt to do the health and safety justification instead of amending. So the health and safety justification, and that allows us to just submit the paperwork and prove it to the Building Standards Commission, just one entity. The moment you alter the energy code at all, whether you're doing all electric or you're doing a renovations, reach code, whatever it is the moment that you have to submit also extra paperwork to the CEC, the California Energy Commission.
It's complicated.
Yeah, good. In summary, it's complicated.
It's complicated, nuanced. And, you know, your point about staff time is understood and taken under advisement. But I think that that's a really, you know, there's so many moving pieces here.
Right.
And everyone, thank you for all the work that you've done to try and get everybody aligned and do the heavy lifting on the analysis and the design. I really appreciate that.
Can I just add to that for clarification? I think if you're doing the all electric code for health and safety justification, it's okay to kind of jurisdictions like Fairfax or San Anselmo did it in between these 3-year code cycles. And a lot of jurisdictions can generally just do it at any time because they're not amending any major code. So in the case of if you do a renovations reach code for existing buildings, as I said in the model, you want to align that with the code cycle as best as possible. That's the one, if you do deviate, that takes a lot more staff time to sort of go through that paperwork and do analysis. So yeah, all electric codes, you can get away, I wouldn't say get away with it, you can just sort of do those at sort of any time. For the energy codes or Cal Green EV codes, you want to do it at the same time, best practice, same time as with the code cycles.
I'm going to have to listen to this whole recording again, but I really know, but you explained it beautifully. I just need to process that a little bit, but I really appreciate that.
Can you explain tier 1 and tier 2 in general?
Sure. So Cal Green, or which is part 11 of the Title 24 building codes, establishes mandatory provisions, or sort of the minimum standards for buildings, green building. And so that's a state standard. Tier 1 is the next step above and beyond that code. Now, it's not tier 1, you decide what tier 1 is. The state establishes standards in order to meet tier 1. So what it looks like to the project applicant and to the over-the-counter interactions is just basically a checklist. It's like, do these handful of things and then do these 1 or 2 elective measures, and they're standardized, right? So boom, 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 boom. Tier 2, it's do a handful of these things and do more elective measures. So you're basically doing, these are elective measures, but when you adopt it at the local level, you're saying tier 1, we adopt that, or tier 2, we are making that mandatory, that standardization mandatory for our local community.
And that's only applies to the Cal Green part 11 component. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Can you just give me one example of a tier 1 and how to differentiate from a tier 2?
Oh.
And if you can't, we don't need to tie up everyone's time.
Yeah. Okay. For electric vehicles, for example, you're doing a certain percentage of let's say you have 3 levels of EV capable, EV ready, and then EV chart installed infrastructure. State minimum will have a certain percentage at this level of that. Tier 1 will have a higher percentage of EV ready and EV installed, and tier 2 will have an even higher percentage than that.
Okay, good. Thank you. And so that doesn't apply to the non-CalGreen part, which would be part 9, you said, is that it?
No, so that means non-energy, right? I just the way to sort of differentiate, but that is part of CalGreen, and so those also apply too, but their tiering scheme is different than the EV ones, but it's sort of the same. It's more like the checklist thing that I mentioned earlier.
Okay. You see, just as an aside here, folks, why communicating this to our citizens is so critical to do it clearly and carefully, because you can get lost real quick, and it's, you know, because of regulations that are beyond, you know, what we thought of, right? Anyway, so I'm going to, and that's, Brian, why I keep harassing you with these questions, because when I write something in the Chronicles, it's got to be, you know,
Accurate,
precise, accurate, and clear. And yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that, Martin, because it is quite a bit to digest and then summarize. But thank you, Brian, for all the detail. I had a quick question for you about the 70 to 80% of our housing stock would be renovations would apply to that. I'm gonna probably not use the same language you used, but the way I got it was that there would be a scorecard of sorts for that you would essentially add up based on different things you were doing in your renovation. Is the idea that that would be consistent across jurisdictions so that contractors and builders are all using the same scorecard?
It's so the way that tool breaks down, if I could simply say it is based on climate zone. So across Marin jurisdiction, you're a climate zone 2 or 3. And so climate zones will have a different score, as it will. And then from that, once you establish that for your climate zone, you can decide whether your cost effectiveness score is, like, for example, 30 points. And these 30 points represent 1 point equals 1 million BTUs of energy savings. BTU being an energy measurement. And so in that 30 points, for example, you could require an applicant to meet all 30 points, 100% of it, or you can require them to meet half of that at 50%, or keep ratcheting that lower. So within that, those change, like the target scores. And the reason why you sort of adjust those target scores to your community is sort of, what are your policy objectives? Do you want to incentivize electrification, or do you just want to stick to energy efficiency measures? Also, guidance by the state said that even though they developed the tool, that 50% might be pushing it for a lot of communities, just as sort of a gauge. So what we recommended was 40% of the max score that we can do.
Okay, but then the jurisdiction has the liberty to change it based on their goals.
On their goals, correct.
Okay.
So you could go to 100%, and 100% is your max measures that you could, or sort of all the different measures that applicant can choose from. And 30 represents everything that is the max cost effectiveness. So if you can't go above that, because it won't be cost effective anymore.
Okay.
And the way you get those points is by saying what you're going to do. For example, doing a heat pump HVAC gets you a whole lot more points than, you know, sealing up the windows, for example, or, you know, changing your cooking, because that's only, you know, doesn't contribute as much greenhouse gas in our case. That's the way. And it's different for the age of the facility. If you're before 1978, it's a little more stringent than, and that's all out there. And this is the kind of thing I want to be presenting and showing simple examples of to the folks so they understand what it means. It's taken me a while to get there. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for that. And I know I'm just watching the clock and we have about 5 minutes. I have other questions, but does anybody else have any questions? Any other thoughts? Can I just ask one? I'm curious about, I wrote that down of 9 out of 10 architects said that 9 out of 10 homeowners just want gas. And I'm curious, when you did the focus groups, what the sentiment was from architects and contractors.
Oh boy. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the same architects that we invited in were just sort of who we could get. So I think the person let's just say this, for example, the person who said the 9 out of 10 we invited, they weren't able to come. It was just hard to come by a lot of architects because everyone's super busy. So a lot of the ones that were engaging were the ones that were already sort of doing this in the Marin community, doing a lot of projects, green building related projects, and have pushed the envelope on that case. We did get and we also focus a lot on the multifamily architects as well. So what you saw, that 9 out of 10 was a quote from single family single family new construction architect. So
and then in the survey that you have on the site, I'm just curious, is there a strong contingent of contractors and architects providing feedback through the survey?
I'm not sure it's anonymous, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead. Anonymous.
It's anonymous, but what we do is through the robust engagement we're doing, we have been sending it out through MBA and through all our architects, contractors, developers that have participated in our workshops, and community advocates, and they're less served. So we're just trying to get it out broadly.
Yeah.
But yeah. But we have, we've gotten already through the focus groups. That's where that's why it's a focus group. We got a lot of good feedback, a lot of good pain points, barriers, as well as solutions to those during the focus groups. And so those were super important.
Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. Brian, thank you. That was very helpful. Chris, is there anything?
No, nothing further to add other than Brian Reyes has done a fantastic job collaborating and corresponding and helping the jurisdictions in Marin raise the level of communication and coordination on this.
So I'd like to ask you, just for your feedback, where do you see Corte Madera in this process? And do you have concerns about our being able to move this forward in a timely fashion? Do you have concerns about adopting it? Do you have concerns about pushback or implementation? Have you guys been able to kind of form an opinion or issues that you would like to work through?
Well, one thing in particular that stands out, as Brian mentioned, the existing building stock and requiring electrification of that is going to be the biggest hurdle, and the one that we want to clarify and have a good path with before we would implement such a measure, and be in coordination with as much as we can in neighboring jurisdictions and simplify it from a review and inspection standpoint, because that would take we are already overworked and under-resourced, and adding that to the tasks of our plan review and inspection and permitting, I don't think would be a good direction right now. And it's also not clear on where we would set those metrics as far as existing stock. As far as new construction, as many of the a number of the jurisdictions who have passed new construction requirements in Marin County, we don't have a lot of new construction stock. That would be in the easiest place to start, and that we could do as long as it's identified, like it is in some of the summary information that Brian provided as far as residential and commercial, with a number of exceptions that could be applied. So that would be the easiest, and as far as to implement and to enforce and to adopt. And if you recall the grand jury report, and Brian said the difficulty with this, recommendation 3, so recommendation 1 was new construction, recommendation 2 was existing renovations, for example, and number 3 was providing a comprehensive strategic approach with neighboring jurisdictions, which Brian's been working on. And that one, as far as this body pushing and let's say influencing the rest of the county to be unified in that approach, that would be very powerful. The recommendation 3, and in part of that recommendation 3, of course, is also the equity as far as incentivizing. How are we able to do these things and not punish ourselves in a sense, especially those who truly don't have the resources to spend the kind of money, say, on renovations, for example. They're just trying to do a simple upgrade, and all of a sudden they're hit with these things that's oppressive in a sense, as far as regulatory. So sorry to, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but number 1, new construction, as Brian showed, would be the most simplest for this community to say we could move forward with that. I would like to know number wise where the other jurisdictions are. I haven't recently got a number on that, but Brian can be a great resource with that too, as far as understanding where we as a whole body in the 12 jurisdictions in the county.
Chris, that was really, really helpful to hear that. I appreciate that. However, the thing is, we're pretty much built out. And I saw a statistic somewhere and I forgot it. For Corte Madera, the ratio of new versus existing building permit applications is pretty skewed. Do you know what that is?
Skewed is a good word. Yes, it is by far a minority of the permits that we process. We do have some, of course, in our near future with the increased housing stock that we will be implementing or bringing about. That can be significant. And we have some larger commercial projects that are coming up, as far as larger in comparison to what we currently issue and process right now. So there are some coming, but that is correct that frankly, it is a political win. It is we're doing something. New construction is required to be electric. And it's a step in the right direction. Like I said, it is it's the simplest to achieve.
But it is effective from the standpoint of the longevity of built construction. So the fewer new gas hookups that are provided, for example, can have a big impact. So that's the good news. The other news is that, we're 99% built out, and a lot of the houses are from the 60s and 70s, and that's problematic. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, correct. It would have a long-term effect for sure, especially with the
big multifamilies and commercials.
Right. And going forward, it would say, this is what we stand for and this is the direction we're headed. And to the building industry, saying all new construction, no more gas. That's significant. I mean, that's
Yeah.
headed in the right direction.
And appliance manufacturers, yes.
Correct.
Brian, can you speak to Chris's comment about where all the other 10 other jurisdictions are? You know where the county is?
Well, county is certainly, as we had proposed, the model reach codes. So we're going for the, so let me start with all electric new construction. So there's us, obviously, San Anselmo, Fairfax. Boy, where's the other? San Rafael, Mill Valley. Now, I'm not speaking for them. They're just sort of.
No. I don't want you to call. I don't want you to call anyone out.
Yeah. Oh, you don't want me to? Okay, so.
I mean, you did.
A general sense. I mean, ideally, maybe we can get all electric.
This sort of negotiation among jurisdiction staff to try and find consensus if we could get all 12 jurisdictions together. Do you have a sense of where we're in trouble, or how many are really going for this, or indicating that they? You just give us a number. You don't have to give us names.
Okay, that's fine. No, I mean, 10. In the range from 8 to 10, all electric is the indication that I'm getting. Again, as I said in my presentation, and as Chris has mentioned, it is the simplest. It is a lot of precedence in doing all electric for new construction. There's legal pathways that have been established, so it's reinforced. The existing the existing buildings, and we're talking whole buildings, and we're not talking about appliance changeouts. Just want to make sure I differentiate that. Is the next sort of step, if one would like to take that. Of the 12 jurisdictions I've gotten an indication interested, at least there's 3 to 4 of us interested. Obviously the county will pass it. That pathway is complicated, right? And as Chris said, we need to find ways to be able to simplify and streamline over-the-counter collateral and applications and how you're going to enforce that. This has not been done anywhere else except for Palm Springs, which just passed the ordinance. So actually, they have it in the books, but I don't know where they're at in terms of how many. So it's Palm Springs and us looking at this tool. I will say lastly that this structure, which is a lot like a previous rating system called Greenpoint rating, kind of based on a score. The developers from the state had indicated that for new construction, this type of scheme, the state is looking at integrating and is going to review this during the intervening code cycles, which is in between now and the next code cycle, as it's being sort of a structure even for new construction. This type of scheme might become commonplace, but as with anything that's starting out new, who knows where it's going to go.
What about replacing on burnout?
Yeah, so the county we're releasing it soon, but I'm not doing this study, but Dana Armanino is leading a study on what that would look like through an equity lens. And so in the county's climate action plan, and I think in some others, that we would look at by 2024 what a time of replacement consider, which means we're evaluating. And so we follow through on that, and we're going to release that sometime by the end of this year, I think. So at least what that could look like. And of course, we're going to share it with all jurisdictions. But no one has done it yet. And interesting to see who would be there first.
Yeah, or the city of San Mateo almost passed a replace on burnout the other night. Almost passed. And they're close. So maybe that's a template that we could take a look at.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think it's possible, but there's other things that are fundamental that we need to get a hold of to do something like that. For example, looking at something like the city of Davis that did, to get in place some type of time of sale audit or something like that. Like that's going to be super important to understand what's coming down the pipeline. So anyways, there's a lot of things that are fundamental to compliance and building codes that also need to be resolved either simultaneously and first before we think about a time of change out, time of replacement.
Very helpful again. So thank you, Brian. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. And also want to say thank you since Chris gave me a shout out, I appreciated it. For Chris, he's been very gracious and responsive and helpful in the engagement. So thanks, Chris.
So I know we are over time for our meeting. I guess I would say to the committee what our action should be relative to this topic. Is this something we want to devote our next meeting to? Do we want to put it out to the ad hoc subcommittee and how we approach this next?
My understanding is that Oakland is getting a new employee. So I want to ask Phil and staff how we can best support staff and meet the deadlines that are coming up with the anticipation that we'll have perhaps some new council members in December who might not be up to speed on this. So we need your help to guide this conversation, I think.
Right. I would say just to, take in what you've heard from Brian and Chris and try to consolidate as a committee, what is your recommendation and direction that you want to give to Bob at your next meeting, or whether, as Amy said, you want to put this in the top of your agenda for your next meeting, and to determine how you want to move forward, and what recommendation or suggestion do you want to move forward to Bob and then via the council.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I just want to ask Phil, who's on the subcommittee, and David's not here, but sounds like we kind of need a study session as an ad hoc subcommittee. A study session. Brian, we might send you a couple of emails. We'll try not to take much of your time, but we might need help with some clarification and from Bob and from you guys as well. But yeah, Amy, I think that's a good idea, that we should have a better understanding of the timeline at our next meeting, and some kind of discussion we'll report out from the subcommittee. Does that sound?
Great.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah. And I think that there at some level, I think that's a lot, so maybe I'll just stop. But I think there is a communications component here to potentially support staff on the planning side as people go for permits and think about how they're going to renovate and what that looks like. But that's for
23. Yeah.
23. All right. So with that, I'm going to ask that we move our last agenda item to the next meeting and close the meeting. Am I allowed to do that?
You're allowed to do that.
All right. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you, Chris, for being here for
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris.
Bye, everyone. Hey, Chris.
Really appreciate it. Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Meeting adjourned. Is that?
Meeting adjourned.
All
Thank you.
right.